All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What Drives You. I am one of your co-hosts, Stan Windhorn. With me, as always, is my good buddy and co-host, Carl Bauer. Carl, say hello to everyone.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday after it's Friday, yeah, Friday afternoon
It's
here.
Friday.
Yeah,
It's going to be
and
Friday all day long, Carl.
24 hours, that's good. And
Yeah.
we have a special guest, OG from the car business and data business, my friend Jared from Black Book. Hey Jared,
Gentlemen, how are you?
we're good.
Great to
We're
be
good.
here.
Yeah. Appreciate you taking time to be with us, Jared. I think we
Thrilled
should
and
just
flattered.
start off. I mean, people in the industry, car business probably know about Black Book, but if you run into somebody at a restaurant and they say, "Well, what's Black Book? How do you explain what Black Book is?"
Yeah, so for those that both know and don't know, I've been kind of using this over the last few years because we've really transformed. We're a 71-year-old data company that was founded in 1955, kind of out in the far reaches of northern Atlanta in Gainesville, Georgia, which is about 90 miles north of downtown Atlanta. And we started off as a traditional guidebook, literally printing books based on auction transactions of wholesale vehicles, and grew to be, one of the largest in the space in that. And then fast forward all of these years, most people still, to an extent, that's what they know us for. Oh, you're a guidebook. And I very quickly transition and say, we haven't been a guidebook, just a guidebook in a long time. We're truly a pure play data and analytics company. And we have all kinds of data, which I'm happy to share with you. And we are in the risk business, that is overarching in the trust business. People say, "What do you do for a living?" I'm like, "I'm in the trust business." People place their bets on all the kind of data that we've got, for all different types of use cases, that are all driven around a VIN, and ultimately evaluation.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Stan, real quick flashback for me, and Jared wasn't working there then, but when I got in the auto space in 93, one of the highest coveted things that I could get in my week to week job, shooting pictures of used cars, was these little paper Bible type of uh, paper thickness books, these
Yeah.
tiny little books that you hid because all my used car managers had them and they were their Bibles, literally their Bibles. And
Yep.
every week they got a new set. So I could get the old ones from the week before. And it was a huge victory. We'd be using books from like a month or two old. And these guys would every week would have these books. Fast forward to when I had my dealership and I would be at the auction in the lanes. There were people literally, Jared, I don't know if you were there then, with clipboards writing down the
Yeah.
sold
That's
value
right. That's right.
of the car instantly what happened. And I don't know what they'd scramble back to you guys and enter them into a database. And
Yeah.
that became, the data of the week from
Yeah. We called those surveyors, and we
survey.
had them spread out over 50, 60 auctions. And this was obviously before API and digital and things like that. And they were recording not just the results, but the why behind it. What was auction attendance like that week? Was it a giant crowd and very competitive, or was it raining and nobody was there? Right. This is obviously before the simulcasts and the OVEs and the this and the that. And the only way to really understand your business is to actually be where the business takes place. And so we paid a lot of money for a lot of people for a lot of years, and the business has grown up. Carl, you might be surprised. Maybe you won't be. We still print those books today. It is a very, very small piece of our business. But as much as we try to fire ourselves, there are still folks that want to subscribe to that book, and it's still profitable. So we continue to serve the community.
And I might be making this up, Jared. Sorry, Sal, I'll get you here in a
That's
second.
all right.
Um, because Manheim, largest auction house for auto space, was doing their own Manheim market report, there was a little bit of like, hey, we're not letting Black Book in here because they're a different competitor. And like, so it was kind of this weird dynamic of we're all trying to help the industry and give trust, right? Give
Yeah.
data to them,
Yeah.
but they were a competitor. How did that play
Yeah,
out?
so I would say, to be, not to say I'm correcting you, but to maybe to clarify, um, Mannheim certainly has MMR, right? And if you don't know what MMR is, I'm an old Cox guy. I'm an old Mannheim guy. I spent time there. I spent almost 7 years there. And it is the aggregation of all the vehicles that sell within the Mannheim universe, either in the physical auctions or digital online OVE simulcast. But Mannheim and Cox particular, they've been wonderful to Black Book.
Hmm.
They've never had any issues over the years with our survey folks that used to be there, providing us data. They view us honestly as Switzerland, because somebody says, "Oh, what's the difference between Black Book and MMR or Black Book and Kelly Blue Book?" Black Book actually has the largest aggregate data set of all wholesale transactions. So we just talked about MMR. MMR is great, but it's only limited to the vehicles that sell in the Mannheim universe. Black Book is all of those plus, 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 plus. So we can talk about it in detail if you want. And so I don't know that they would call us competitors, and I don't know that we would call them competitors because we have different, it's almost kind of going to McDonald's versus going to Five Guys. There's some different,
Yeah.
secret stuff there, that's unique. But no, they've been wonderful to us for 70 years. In fact, I don't know if you know the background of this, how Cox actually got into the auction space. Are you familiar with that story and
Mm-mm.
started Manheim?
Mm-mm.
So you might find this interesting. The gentleman that started Black Book, his name was Gene McDonald, and he was a used car independent dealer in the 40s and 50s. And he got so good at buying cars wholesale that he decided to start writing them down, and hence became the Black Book. And he started that in 1955. So that we're 71 years old, and it took off. Fast forward to the mid 1960s. Mr. Gene, who just passed away like 2 years ago. He was 96 years old. I was fortunate enough to meet him and actually
Wow.
go to his funeral. Mr. Gene gets on the board of Cox Enterprises,
Hmm.
which was Cox newspapers and Cox television and all that. And because they're in Atlanta, Gainesville was close to Atlanta. And Mr. Gene recommended to his other board members, there's this little auction in Manheim, Pennsylvania. You guys should go take a look at that thing and maybe decide that you want to get in that business. So they all took a field trip and they went up to Manheim, PA, which obviously anybody who knows that's just the holy ground of
Mecca.
the
Yeah.
wholesale, the Mecca. And they bought that auction. And then they bought three or four more in New Jersey and some other places. And we call him Mr. Gene because we're from the South here. And Mr. Gene is responsible for Cox getting into the auction business, which became Manheim. Now, very quick past that, Cox then purchased Black Book. Now, most people don't know that.
Huh.
So Cox purchased Black Book in the mid to late 60s. I don't know the exact date. Um, Fast forward to the early 70s, early mid 70s, that's when they created MMR. So Cox owned Black Book and MMR at the same time in the 70s. Fast forward to it's either 80 or 81. I don't remember the exact date. You had Cox and you have Hearst. And Hearst is another giant media conglomerate, television, newspaper, radio, et cetera, et cetera. And Cox wanted to get into the cable TV business in like 80 or 81. I can remember I came home from school in the fifth grade in 1981 and we had cable one day and it was MTV.
Yeah.
So it was right in that time period. And they sold a bunch of assets to Hearst, including Black Book. They said, "Oh, we don't need Black Book and MMR." And so
Right.
Hearst bought us. It was either 80 or 81. Hearst bought us, and we've been part of the Hearst family since 1980 or 81. But Cox owned us for a while, and Mr. Gene was the one that got him in the Manheim business.
Great story.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's super interesting. The whole Hearst name is fascinating. There's such a long history with them. A lot of people
that's right.
remember Patty Hearst and that
That's right.
whole
That's right.
she
Yeah.
was the heiress and she got kidnapped and
She
then
got
kind of
kidnapped.
joined in
Yeah,
with her
that's
kidnappers.
right.
And
Yeah.
there's a show called Deadwood that I enjoy on
Yeah. On
HBO,
HBO.
and
Yeah.
they talk about Hearst and his how they kind of started that whole empire. But just I kind of want to rein it back just for a second.
Sure.
Carl, I feel like the last episode we did, Jared, was with a guy who's into skydiving, and I used to be into skydiving. So we were talking a lot about skydiving and maybe talked about some things that someone who'd never done the sport very much, they weren't quite understanding all the lingo. So that's kind of what I want to do right now. A
Yeah,
lot of our
fair.
listeners are not in the car business. And so a
Sure.
lot of the things you guys are talking about, Manheim, which is a big auction in the automobile industry.
Yeah.
Cox Automotive is a huge vendor that has all kinds of different vendor solutions for the automobile industry. But kind of back to my original question, if someone who was not in the car business said, "What is Black Book?" I think a lot of people when they hear Black Book, they're thinking the Black Book in Vegas that keeps cheaters out of the casinos.
Yeah.
But maybe in terms of someone who's not in the car business, explain to them how Black Book assists car
Sure.
dealers.
Sure. So, Black Book data, which we have been historically, but not necessarily anymore, have been known as a valuation guide. Literally, what's called a guidebook. That's kind of what it started off in the 50s and went there. And essentially, it was a pricing guide. So you have, especially in the older days, you had people at physical auctions that consumers could not visit. So from a car dealer perspective, I know Carl knows this for sure. There's really only a couple of ways that a dealer can get a used car, right? I can go in and buy another one and trade one in, right? Or they can buy one through a wholesale channel, and a wholesale channel would be typically from an auction. And dealers will either bring vehicles that are not good fits for them. Maybe I own a Lexus dealer and I got a trade-in of a pickup truck and I can't retail that. Or maybe there's off-lease vehicles, there's rental vehicles, but there's all these vehicles that come through a marketplace, and the marketplace would be um, the auction. And I kind of describe it as the stock exchange, right? If I wanted to buy stock, I got to find someone who wants to sell me a share, right? And so in this one, I want to buy a car. I got to find someone that's going to sell me a car. So the auction is it's also known as a remarketing, where someone is remarketing a particular vehicle that they don't need or didn't work for them, and then someone is going to buy that vehicle, and that marketplace is the auction. Black Book serves as a guide in the wholesale arena, or started off serving as a wholesale guide as what to pay for those vehicles while you were at auction. So you need to have some sort of data to determine, okay, it's a 2017 Camry LE in red with 42,000 miles on it. What should I pay? And a guidebook traditionally would give you what the values of that vehicles are, excuse me, would come up with the value of that vehicle based on aggregate transactions of like similar vehicles. So there's 20 other 2017 Camrys that were sold. Today it's much different, but there's much more data out there. And so they would use these folks, and literally these books that Carl was describing, they would fit, it almost like a little rectangle. They would fit in the shirt pocket, and they
Mm.
made them like a rectangle. So they would fit them in the shirt pocket, and they would pull them out, and they were flip books. You'd open the top of the page up, and you would go find 2017 Camry LE mileage, and we would give you four conditions. Is it extra clean? It's perfect. Is it clean? Is it average, or it's rough? And you just figure out what that is. And then you'd start to bid based off of a guide. All right, now that's a good starting point. I won't overpay. I won't try to underpay and steal it. Now that has morphed into significantly more data, but that's
Yeah.
kind of how it was birthed.
Yeah. So to put it in terms of maybe people would understand, it's sort of like if you're going to buy a house, you're going to look, or you're going to sell your house, you're going to look at comps. You're going to look
There
at
you
what
go.
other similar houses have sold for.
That's right.
That's kind of what Black Book does in very simple terms for people who are in the car business.
That is our core product evaluations. We did many other things, but that is how it started and what we're best and most known for. 100%, Stan.
Well, I'd like to know, how did you find your way to being with Black Book?
um, I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, and nobody I knew was in the car business. There was a movie, I think, in the 80s, The Accidental Tourist. I'm the
Mm.
accidental car guy. Like, there's just no reason I should be here. I didn't know anybody in the business. It wasn't like I grew up in Detroit and there was Northwood University. No, there's just nothing. This was an accident. You couldn't have, the 16-year-old Jared would have never bet on this. There's just no way. Ultimately, I'm a victim of, I went to school and I graduated and I had school loans. And I had to get a job and I had to pay my school loans back after college. And this was in the early 90s. And literally looking in the newspaper, like that's how old we are these days, but looking in the newspaper and answering blind ads. And anybody that would have said you have a job, I would have said yes. And the first one to say yes after sending out a gazillion resumes over 6 months was Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Mm.
And they had a management training program. And I think it was like $21,000 or something like that in 1994. And I was like, yes, I'm in. I'll figure it out when I get there. And I faked it enough and sounded good enough that they said, we'll hire you. It turned out I didn't know it. It turned out that Enterprise at the time, and I think it's still still the same thing today, that they hire more recent college graduates than any other kind of management training program. And they sold me. They sold me, and I call it a pyramid, but not in a bad way. You learn the business from the bottom. You work your way up. You become a manager. You do this, you that. I was like, I'm going to stay here forever. And they threw me in a training class, and I was vacuuming out rental cars 2 weeks later, and in the cold and the rain. And I worked my way up, and I learned how to sell a little bit, and I learned about pricing. I learned about that, and over a few years, I was there almost 5 years. I touched a bunch of different departments, worked my way up, and absolutely fell in love with honestly, it was the remarketing side of the business. So I went through all this branch manager stuff. I was running a branch. I was running an area. I was an area manager. And then they moved me into corporate, and they said, "Well, we want you to remarket these vehicles. So we buy these rental cars, we keep them for 18 to 20 months, and then we have to dispose of them. You're going to learn how to dispose of these cars." I went into the auctions, and this is literally when you would go to, and I would sell Cadillac sedan DeVilles, like 40 of them at a time, in the mid
Mm.
90s. And one day I got a phone call in 1999 out of the blue. And Carl, I think might know this story um, a headhunter. This is the .com days, 99. Said, "Hey, I'm representing a company that's going to figure out how to sell cars online. Are you interested in an interview?" And they just caught me on the right day. I had no intention of leaving, but I said, "I'll go down." And they said, "All right, we have 2 spots left. We have the first one. We have 8 people. The first one or the last one?" And I said, "Oh, never going to need get past the second one. I'll take the first one, right?" And I walked down there, and there's like 7 or 8 other enterprise guys at the Atlanta Airport Hilton that all got the same phone call. And it turns out it's Cars Direct, where,
Oh,
where
okay.
Carl was. And they had 4 or 5 employees, including Scott Painter at that point in 1999. And they said, "Hey, we're hiring. We're going to figure out how to sell cars online. We don't know how we're going to do it yet, but we got a lot of money, and now's the time. This thing's going to go to the moon. Are you in? And we'll pay you in stock." It was 1999, and I got hired on as the 12th employee of Cars Direct. Best mistake I ever made again, and wasn't looking for it. Learned so much. But my background in enterprise, from negotiating the deals, selling the rental cars, purchasing the rental cars, all of that. Cars Direct at that time needed to figure out how to acquire inventory. So they wanted, essentially become a broker and go set up these relationships with these dealers in 8 or 9 states. If we need a Honda, we need to know what we're going to pay for an Accord in Raleigh, or in a Camry in Jacksonville. And I spent tons of years doing that. And then they moved into other things that we started selling. And I ended up staying there 7 years. I was there till 2006.
Hey,
Uh,
Jared, can I pause you right there?
yeah,
How many
please.
of those first 12 people were enterprise people? Because I feel like in many of our even Stan and I at TrueCar, there are so many high-powered,
Yeah.
high-up executive
Yeah.
people that started their careers at Enterprise. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
I was
So,
just going to say the exact same thing when we were hiring big at TrueCar. If they came from Enterprise, that meant
yeah.
they were well trained, and we hired a lot of
So
people.
here's the
All of
funny
a sudden,
story.
this has become a commercial for Enterprise.
So here's the funny story. I get out to California on, when we got hired, and there's 7 or 8 regional managers. I was the Southeast. And hey, nice to meet you. Where'd you come from? Enterprise. Hey, nice to meet you. Where'd you come from? Enterprise. 7 of the 8 came from Enterprise, and Enterprise threatened to sue the recruiting company and Cars Direct. They're like, you can't sue that, right?
Everybody was
So
getting stolen from
that's
Enterprise.
right. So I mean, yeah, Enterprise does a great job. Does a great job. So I left Cars Direct just before they went public in 2006 because Manheim came calling. And I love the auction business. They're part of Cox. They're in Atlanta. And at the time, Manheim was trying to create an inventory management system. This is before vAuto and before this and before that. To I don't want to say self-serving in a negative way because it's a brilliant idea, but they created something called Point. And I was one of the directors of sales of Point. They needed someone that understood how to sell to dealers and could build a team and do this. And um, Point was one of the early, it was the second inventory management system before all the ones that are out there today. And inventory management, for your non-auto folks, I describe it as, if a car dealer has 100 parking spaces on their lot, they only have room for 100 cars. They need the right 100 cars, the ones that turn the quickest, sell the fastest, make the most money, and Point would point you towards those. Hey, get rid of these two and replace it with these other two. And by the way, you can do all of this at a Manheim auction. That's the self-serving piece of it. And it turned out that Manheim very quickly, they were a much better auction company than the software company. Point was not, fantastic. And ultimately, that's why they bought vAuto. But they saw enough in me, thankfully, that they said, you know what, we're gonna invest in you. And I ended up spending almost 6 years at Manheim and Cox, learning the entire remarketing space, handling strategic relationships with companies like DealerTrack before they bought them, and just doing a ton of things. I was fortunate enough to where I was running sales for the Western United States, so all of the dealer sales, all the auction dealer sales teams from the Mississippi River to Hawaii. It was a very, very large job, and I absolutely loved it. So I did that for about 6.5 years, and then I ended up at Black Book. And I've been at Black Book. It'll be 14 years next month in June.
Wow. Nice
Started
run.
off started off running sales in one of the verticals. I've worked my way up, and I'm grateful and fortunate enough that I became the president of Black Book about 4.5 years ago. And
Hmm.
That's quite a run. And I love hearing those kinds of stories. One of the things that I have found in my, let's see, how long have I been in true automotive? 16 years now, I guess. But it's a kind of a small community in a lot of ways. If I
yeah,
don't know
true.
you, I know somebody who knows you, kind
Right,
of a thing.
right.
But
Yeah.
um, I know Carl's got some questions for you too. But just before we go, I got to tell you one of my Black Book experiences, and I don't remember which trade show it was. I don't think it was NADA. I think it was a smaller one. But Black Book had Arlie Ermy
Mm,
as the
yeah,
celebrity
Gunny,
guest there.
Gunny,
For those
yeah.
of you who don't know
That's
who
right.
he was the drill sergeant. This guy made a living as an actor playing drill sergeants. He was a
Yeah.
drill sergeant, but he's most famous for being the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket.
Yep.
So I got my picture taken with him, and
Yeah.
that was kind of a
He
treat.
was a spokesperson for 4 or 5 years in the just give or take 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. And yes, most people absolutely. And he would come to all the conferences and conventions, and people would flock. I mean, it worked. It worked.
Yeah,
It got people over.
people wanted to get yelled at by him.
That's right. That's right. For
I
sure.
Stan, that might have been NADA because I remember that. I think I was with you. Maybe it was
I
a
think
digital
it was a
dealer.
I think it might have been. I think it was smaller. I just remember that like
It
it
was,
wasn't
it was
really hard to
probably
go
it was
up and
probably
shake
digital
hands with him.
dealer. It was probably
Yeah, I
digital
think it was
dealer
digital
and,
dealer.
and a lot of those things. But yeah,
Yeah.
he ran the circuit with us for a long time.
I just wanted him to ask me what my main malfunction is.
So, Jared, what's interesting about Black Book data, right? So now let's kind of transition into where the data and some AI is that we've had a lot of people on that we talk about AI with. But what Black Book does, the data and the trust that you guys give our industry affects so many different things. So for those of you who aren't in the auto space, your insurance rates, residual values, loan values, your interest rate on the car because it's age and my. So, Jared, how like you guys, it's funny because we talked about this last week is you guys are kind of a small division of Hearst and a small
Yeah.
team, but you impact our industry
Yes.
uh, almost at every level. So how many, and maybe this is how many of automotive customers or insurance customers, how many
Yeah.
people are tapping in or
Yeah.
subscribing to your data monthly?
Yeah, so the way it's a good point, Carl. I appreciate you acknowledging that. The way that I describe it is that um, giant brand, like the brand Black Book is huge. Rarely do anybody you call up and you go, "Hey, I'm from Black Book." Who? Right? Most people are familiar with Black Book. Now they're not familiar with everything that we do, but they're certainly familiar with the name. But I would say that because we're a data company, it's a very a small footprint as far as people go. But when you look at the verticals that we serve. It's auto finance. So our customers are the vast majority of the OEMs are utilizing Black Book data in one way, shape, or another. We've got a touch over 3,500 what we call lending customers,
Hmm.
banks, credit unions, credit bureaus. Um, uh, the captives. We've got insurance carriers, to your point, that are there, state, local, federal government. What we call the VAR, value added reseller. Those would be the third parties of the software systems that we power. So the DMS providers, the CRMs, the equity mining tools, marketing companies, you know, the desking tools and dealerships. Um, we are in the US and Canada. So we also own Canadian Black Book, and I am fortunate to oversee both. We have an office in Toronto, and they are the premier data source in Canada. So, to give you numbers, there's a touch over 16,000-ish of the 18,000 franchise dealers. There's close to 40,000 independent dealers. There's gobs of OEMs. There's a ton of captives, lenders, insurance carriers. Anything that touches a VIN and or a valuation, whether it be a current value, a future forecasted residual value, or other things, we are fortunate enough to play in that space.
It's interesting, Stan, what the trickle down when I was, back in the day fighting for those little Bibles, books that to come fast forward 33 years later and see just how impactful and what they do even on the residual value, how the if manufacturer, for those of you who don't understand automotive and leasing, there's two kind of components to that, right? There's a residual value, which is the higher the residual value is, that means the least less amount of you're renting the car for, right? So OEMs, manufacturers are always fighting for high residual values, right? And then the money factor, which is basically just the interest rate, that will determine. So if you have a super high residual value and a super low money factor, you got a really cheap lease payment, right?
Right. That's right.
So what they do in tracking that, because if they make a mistake, Black Book makes a mistake or Black Book data, and you get to the end of your lease term and they're like, all right, Carl, your payoff is $20,000 to buy this car. And at the auction, it's only worth 15,000. Like there's some big companies have gone out of business. Big brands have been crushed
Right.
by these errors, not necessarily by you guys, but just,
No, you're right.
actuaries that messed up forecasting at the beginning of the term.
That's right.
It's a serious business. Not only is it trust, but if you mess up on these residuals and these
Well,
values, whole industries are wrecked.
think about this on scale. Okay. This is why I say we're in the trust business. They are betting on us. What do you do for a living? I'm in the trust business. Okay. If you're any manufacturer, any captive, Toyota, Honda, GM, doesn't matter. Okay. And you're betting on us. And we say the residual value. What's the residual value? It's the future forecasted value. What's that vehicle going to be worth 3 years and 36,000 miles from now? It means we have to look into a crystal ball today and say, who knew about the pandemic? Who knew about the Iran war? Who knew
Mm.
about recessions, right? We don't know what's going to happen 3 years from now, but that's what they pay us to do. So we say, okay, 3 years and 36,000 miles, 4 years and 48,000 miles. What's this vehicle going to be worth? If we say that it's going to be worth $20,000, 3 years and 30, it's 30,000 to start or 35, it's going to be worth 20, 3 years and 36,000 miles. Okay. Vehicle comes back 3 years later, it's worth 19.5. Most people are like, damn, you got within $500 of that vehicle. You guys are pretty darn good. Let's run out the math. $500, and they sold 100,000 Camrys that year. 500,000 times $500, right?
A lot of money.
I want to do that math. I think it's $25 million I'm off, right? So, no, I'm sorry, it's 50 million. If I'm off 500,000, I apologize. If I'm off $500 per car at 100,000 cars, I'm off $50 million. It's not a good day for Black Book.
Yeah.
So we're in the trust business for sure, gentlemen.
Yeah. And that leads me to so in my recollection, and let's see if you and I sync up on this. In the last 20 years, what has been the biggest appreciation, excluding EVs, take that EVs out for a second because Elon screws this all up. But in ICE vehicles, what was the biggest swing use in your recollection that you've seen?
I don't bathe in the data as much as the really smart data scientists that I have and the people that are our evaluation. But I can tell you that, and it won't surprise you when I tell you this, most vehicles do not appreciate unless it's a classic car or something, right? A vehicle, I always say a vehicle is like I'm holding my melting ice cream cone, right?
Yeah.
For your viewers at home. And the longer you hold on to that ice cream cone without eating it, it drips and it melts, right? Well, the longer you hold on to that vehicle, it depreciates, right? No vehicle appreciates except when? Pandemic.
Yep.
Right? They were going through the roof. People were trading in three-year-old cars for more than what they bought them 3 years ago because there was no toilet paper on the shelves. We
Yeah.
needed inventory, right? So I can't tell you the exact percentage swing, but everything was looking good in 2020 and 2021 for a long time.
I should have put a caveat out there. Other than COVID too, and
Yeah,
I'll tell you where I'm driving at. There
sure.
was a time when gas prices did this crazy thing, and the
Yes.
Cadillac Escalade, literally within weeks, up 10 grand. Now, remember when gas was
Yeah.
up to, and now it's
Yeah.
getting close to that again. Gas was
That's
up to
right.
what, 550, six
Yeah.
fifty a gallon, and
Yeah.
Escalades just went. I
Yes.
mean, you could buy an Escalade for 10 grand cheaper than you could 6 months prior.
2008, 2009, I think was
Yeah,
that time when gas. But let me tell you what the smart dealers did. They recognized that it was temporary, right? So the smart ones went and bought those cars and stole them in the
yep,
wholesale market, parked them out back, let them sit, and when the oil went down and the market recovered, I think it was 08, 09, when
yep,
the market recovered, they made a killing. They made a
yep.
killing. Those are the folks that I respect the most. Car dealers are who I respect the most. They're in the risk business. They're entrepreneurs. They have to buy a car, sometimes sight unseen, digitally, right? And they generally don't have a buyer for it. It's got to sit on their lot. It's a hard business. But the smart ones took the risk in 08, 09 and did
So
that.
that kind of leads me into EVs because I
Yes.
think this is also the first, other than COVID, the first time in history where we may have a vehicle value But there's this secondary component now, and Stan and I talk about this a lot because he's thinking about an EV or a hybrid or whatever. There's this battery life
Yes.
component. So the car's worth this
Yep.
if the battery is so it's like
Yes.
two separate entities or two separate assets, right?
That's right. That's
Because
right.
I don't know, this car might be perfect, super low mileage, and the battery life has 2 bips left, right?
Yeah,
And you're like,
exactly.
wait a minute, I can't value the. I mean, the car should be worth this, but the battery shot, which is now going to be $10,000-$15,000 to replace. How
That's
is
right.
that affecting what you all do every day?
So it's a great question. So I tell people that these days, 71 years in Black Book, right? These days, we should be able to tell you in our sleep what I'm just making this up, a 2022 Toyota Camry with 47,000 miles. That's not as complex as it was 15 or 20 years ago. There's so much data out there, right? Anybody worth their salt should be able to do that. What Black Book has graduated to, what we aspire to, is to be VIN specific. It's not just a Camry, it's Stan's Camry. It's the one that's sitting in his driveway. Now, what makes that unique? It's the unique vehicle history of that Camry. 2 owners, 1 accident. Maybe it's 1 owner, no accident, never missed an oil change. That thing is perfect, right? But if you have 2 owners, 1 accident, maybe it was a rental car, so it's kind of got the scarlet letter on it, right? It's worth less. So we introduced, I'm going to come to the electric vehicle in a minute. We introduced VIN specific values, including vehicle history, VIN decoding, and things like that. 6, 7 years ago, that takes all these things in, and we are the leader in a VIN specific value, not just a Camry, but that Camry. Following on the heels of that, about 3 or 4 years ago, we introduced something called a battery adjusted value, BAV, battery adjusted value.
Hmm.
Today, we work with partners that if our VIN, if you pass us over a 17-digit VIN, and that particular VIN decodes as a battery, excuse me, decodes as an electric vehicle, right? We work with partners where we ring back through an API the battery specific data on that car, including geography. We know that an electric vehicle in Buffalo is going to act differently and last longer or shorter than one in Miami, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cold weather environment, things like that. We know the battery range on that vehicle. It started off at 400 miles, but it's 4 years old now. It's only 220, right? We know all kinds of things about this vehicle, and we incorporate all those data elements and do an adjustment to our traditional valuation, year, make, model, miles. Well, now we incorporate this battery data. And so to your point, same vehicle, 400-mile range versus a 200-mile range, same vehicle, one's worth more than the other. That's how advanced we are these days.
Do not to get too deep in the weeds on your business, and I don't know what you can share or not. So are you guys buying EV data from Lucid, Rivian, Tesla? Because when they plug in, my understanding, this has been kind of cool, and I think you know this, Jared, Stan knows it for sure. At my day job, we do a ton of business with Tesla on the lending side, right?
Yep. Yep.
Over $1 billion we did with them. But what I think everyone forgets about, forget about the solar and the cellular and all the other things Elon does. He has massive amounts of data
Oh
that
yeah,
he
for sure.
sells
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
every industry under the sun. So
Yeah.
is that
Yeah,
kind of what you're talking
I
about
can't
here? Where,
just, yeah, I can't disclose everything, but what I will tell you is we have data partnerships because we're specialists in certain things and other things we acknowledge that other people have data that they're specialists in, and we just want the best data,
yeah.
right? We're in the trust business. We can't get cheap on this stuff. So yes, we acquire through partnerships all kinds of data, bring that data back in-house, and I've got an amazing analytics and data science team that runs through that data and ultimately adjusts vehicle values, incorporates it. It's almost like ingredients in a recipe into a casserole, right?
Yeah.
We're getting the best, freshest ingredients. We're paying up for the most of this and doing that. And then ultimately we deliver the entree. The entree is the valuation. And it's based off of the industry's large, this I can tell you, it's the largest cache of data in the industry.
Well, if you're Switzerland, I would want to give, the best data there because I still need something from you. Even though I got this
That's
slice
right.
of specialty battery
That's
data, I need all
right.
this other data from you, so I better
Right.
collaborate, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm not even saying that we pay for the data. Okay, I'm aggregating the data. Most of our partners, they want to contribute to Switzerland because they're like, no, 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 this isn't right. Like, right, then give me the data and I'll make it right.
Yeah.
They all have vested interest in assuring that the valuations are correct. The insurance companies don't want to overpay for a totaled car. The government wants to collect as much tax as they can. The dealer wants to get the appraisal right, the this that. So all of these folks contribute data to ensure that they've got some voice, if you will, in the impact of our valuations. It's an amazing business model. I'm fortunate to be associated with it.
Well, Stan needs some help. He needs some advice, Jared. Here's my question. Stan, I'm not going where you think I'm going, but ICE, hybrid, or EV?
So this is a personal question.
Yeah.
He
And
lives in Austin. Let me give you some data. He lives
yeah,
in Austin. He's very handsy, craftsy. Lumber. Think Home Depot once a week, or I mean once a
yeah, yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah.
That's so we're now you got more context.
Yeah. So again, this is a personal answer. Um, I am a hybrid guy. And I put my money where my mouth is. I recently purchased a hybrid after getting out of a straight ICE. I've never owned an electric vehicle. I still believe that from a price point, I think the challenge with the electric vehicles are from a consumer standpoint. In certain cases, they're still a little pricey. They took the $7,500 tax credit away, beginning of this year, I believe, or late last year. So that made it a little more pricey. And then you still have a little bit of the infrastructure fears of, do I take a long road trip? Am I going to be able to find a Buc-ee's or something like that to charge up and all that stuff? I recently bought a hybrid and I'm getting 54, 55 miles to the gallon. And yeah, personally,
Which
it's hybrid.
hybrid? Which hybrid did you get?
Listen, the president of Black Book drives a Camry. Okay, you're talking to a fairly thrifty guy. So
Yeah.
everyone who knows me knows that I'm pretty thrifty. So I
Well,
have a brand new.
Stan's your
I'm
Toyota
thrifty too.
brother, so there you go,
Yeah,
Stan.
Yeah, yeah, I am, and I'm also very thrifty. I really like the look of the Hummer EV,
yeah, yeah.
but man, the price tag on these things, I'm just like, I
Well,
haven't
that's
had
what
a
I'm saying.
car.
So they're still priced high, and they're not even 7,500, 7,500 higher than they were because that was
Yep,
taken away, right?
yep, yep.
But what
Thanks,
you're
Carl.
seeing today, and there's companies, in the wholesale and the retail place, you've got EV Autos, which is a retail establishment for EVs. You've got Plug that Jimmy runs, which is a wholesale market, a digital dealer, excuse me, a dealer to dealer digital wholesale market that only sells EVs
Yeah.
from there. Those businesses are doing very, very well, not only because of we're in the oil crisis and the wartime and things like that, but now these vehicles are coming off lease 3 years later, and there is a demand for them.
Yeah, I think hybrid makes an awful lot of sense. And we don't have to go down this rabbit hole. We want to be respectful of your time, but Carl really came up with a comment that it was one of the times where Carl actually impressed me. Jared. I'm just kidding. But
Let's stop
Carl,
recording
man,
now before it gets worse, Carl.
I know, no. But no, Carl, I thought had really good insight in this that maybe I don't know if it's the government or the industry or whatever, but they kind of jumped over to EV all the way to EV before like you had said, is the infrastructure there so we can get charged wherever you need and that kind of stuff. And maybe more emphasis should have been put on hybrids,
Yeah.
more hybrid on our way to full EV so
Yeah,
that
yeah,
the
yeah.
infrastructure had time
I
to catch up and all that.
I think some of that was the government, right, and certain administrations and things like that. I'm very apolitical, but there were government incentives, and they incented the manufacturers, and which trickled down to the consumers and things like that. And so I always say that pay plans drive behavior. right? If you're incented to do something, you figure out how to do it, even though, you might be pulling it, accelerating it fast forward. But I mean, the one that didn't do it and ultimately became out the winner right now, it is Toyota. They bet on hybrid, right? They didn't bet on, I can remember Ford, I think I'm going to get this right. They said, each dealer has to uh, invest and upgrade their dealerships. It was like $2 million to have all these EV, charging stations and this and that and the other. It was all this uproar from the dealers, and they made them do it. They made them do it. It's going to keep your blue oval and all this kind of stuff. Where's that now, right? So Toyota bet on hybrid and got, kicked about it for many, many years, but they're kind of laughing now.
Yeah. And I forgot to tell you this, we were looking because you're on your third Tundra? Second? Can't remember.
No, this is I had four Tundras now, four or five.
So they make a hybrid. It's still a grip because any
Yeah.
new pickup right now is,
Oh,
60, 70, 80 grand,
That's what's
hybrid or
keeping me
ICE.
from buying one. I'm
Yeah.
yeah.
like,
We have
geez,
a
Louise.
saying. We have a saying here at Black Book: the most expensive luxury car is a pickup truck. They're
Yeah.
just they're so expensive, so expensive.
That's crazy. Well, yeah, it's interesting. So that's great insight on the EV and hybrid and all that. I have a deposit on a just kind of a I did it for fun, but on a Scout.
Oh yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
I'm looking to see what that hybrid, generator version or whatever that's going to be. I don't know that I'll be able to afford it when I actually say, Carl, here's commit to your final, version of this.
Yeah.
But it's fun to watch them and they send out the data and
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, I don't think there's anybody that's kind of in the know, meaning we're all in the industry, right? That that can fight or that doesn't believe that at some point the de facto default, it's going to be electric vehicles. There's that's how it's going to be. We're just not there yet. And the Scouts and the Slates where you can mix and match and the Rivians, they're all good. Tesla, they're all going to be there, if they can survive. They're all going to be there. But at some point, this is, 100 years from now, we're all driving electric vehicles, right? A 2017 Camry is a collectible car because it's ice,
yeah,
but that's how it's going to be, on the way to flying cars at some point, right? So
we had him on, Mr. Jackson,
yeah, yeah,
on the episode.
there you go.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for that.
Yep, yep.
I'm ready to take to the air.
Well, according to the Jetsons, we would have been there by now. So
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
Well, I
Well,
think it's
Stan, you want to
happening.
fire away? Jared, thank you so much.
Yep.
I mean, I learned so much every time I talk to you. I will say it's funny that we're having this broadcast from where I am in Vegas today, because the last time I physically saw you, we were on one of the charter buses, Stan, going to NADA that
I
particular morning.
remember.
And Jared is usually the most friendly, happy, like just chill looking dude. And he had this like pained look on his face. I'm like, dude, what's up? He's like, I smashed my toe on the bed in the
You
night and
remember
broke.
that?
Then he
I
showed me his toe. I was like, oh my goodness, you need to get off your feet, dude.
I broke my pinky toe an hour before the show at 6 in the morning, not knowing I broke it. I was getting dressed and hit the metal bed frame, and it blew up black and this and
Oh,
that. And I walked on it all day. And you caught me at the end of the day, and I was not happy.
yeah, not good. All right, Stan, fire away, and then I'll ask the words of wisdom question.
Well, I'm excited about this one because I think with Jared's experience in his current position, this takes on a whole new meaning. We ask these questions, these three questions, Jared, of all of our guests, but you'll see why I'm saying this right now. So here's
All right,
question number one. What
start
was your first vehicle you ever owned?
a 1984 three-cylinder Ford Escort that when it rained, that I got in 1988. And when it rained, the distributor cap would die. And when it went uphill, it was so bad I had to turn the air conditioning off because it would stall. It was
Ah,
it was awful.
nice. Nice. Okay, what has been your favorite vehicle that you've ever owned?
My favorite vehicle was an indulgence that I will probably never get again because I've turned a bit thrifty, but was an Audi A4 S line.
Mm,
And for a sedan, it was zippy and it was a bit of an indulgence. I made a little bit of money, and my wife said, "Just do it." And It was an Audi, and I love that vehicle. I love that vehicle. I think it was 2016 or so.
Nice.
Nice.
Okay, and here's the next question. Budget's not a concern. What is your dream vehicle?
Oh, this is tough for me because I I consider myself a fiduciary, so I don't let myself get tempted too much. But I would say I really do admire the kind of James Bond, Aston Martin convertibles that I see. Anytime I see that in a movie or on the street, which is not that often, right? That just catches my eye, and yeah, I could have that in the garage and be pretty happy.
Until you look at the residual, then you're like, ooh,
Oh, well, you said money aside, right? So
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, we
yes.
did that. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Those are cool choices.
all right. Well, we wrap things up again, Jared. Thank you for your time.
Thank
It's
you.
just always fun to catch up with old
Absolutely.
friends and old colleagues. What would current, wise, mature, experienced Jared tell 18-year-old Jared that you wish you knew then that you know now?
Um, I think thematically, the theme would be um, just don't be so conservative. Don't don't be so concerned. Don't be so worried. Don't be so paralyzed to where you play things too close to the vest. It's going to work out, and failure is a good learning lesson, right? If you play things too conservatively, you're never going to see how much you stretch yourself. If you play things too conservatively and try to script out your entire life, you're never going to know exactly what you can do, what you're capable of. So go out there and fail. Failure was a fear of mine for many years. Now failure is, it's making me better. So go, it's going to be okay, and you will learn from everything that you do.
Love that. Love that. I think it
That's
was
beautiful.
Gretzky who said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You got to
That's
take the
right.
chances, right?
That's right. That's right.
Beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
and Jared, you are an inspiration because you it seemed like when opportunity came knocking, weren't very fearful. You took to the next company and a startup and a new role and all that other stuff. You got some good
Yeah.
time and learnings in those places, but you moved 4 or 5 different times and had a great career. So
Yeah, I say that I didn't take the escalator. I took the stairs. Everything that I've done from washing cars to knocking on dealers' doors to doing this to doing that. No one's given me anything. But this is what I will tell you. I'll wrap it up with this. Thankfully, I've only worked at 3 or 4 companies, but every company that I've ever had that I've had the opportunity to work in all the different roles that I served, all of them have prepared me for the chair that I'm sitting in today. I would not be in this chair if it wasn't for learning the rental car business, learning the fleet business, learning the how to sell cars online, learning the auction business at Manheim, knocking on dealers' doors, learning, captives, and all of these are customers that we serve today at Black Book. It has prepared me better than
Nice.
any education ever could have.
Super cool.
that's
Jared,
great.
appreciate you, man. I know you're a busy guy. Thank you so much for taking time to join us on this. Really interesting. Carl, always good to see you, my friend.
Thanks, sir. Thanks,
Everyone,
Jared.
yep. Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much
guys.
for joining us on this edition of What Drives You. And as we always like to say, remember, be good humans to each other. See you next time.